Hello boys and ghouls. I guess you're wondering why I asked you down here to the theater, but word just came down that our longtime member, mentor, singer, and friend died last night. We all knew he'd been hitting the chems pretty hard. An overdose of sucker did him in, but we don't have time to mourn. Not now. I'll be the first to admit that the theater has been getting pretty stale as of late, and the boss Benny is off on business, so it's up to us to figure out the solution. There's plenty of music out there, and frankly, I'll have a sit and listen to almost anything. Deranged cowboys with guitars, yodeling protectrons, ghouls whistling through their jawbone. Almost anything. I have listened to some pretty strange music since we made our way down here and settled up at the tops. One strange singer from years ago, back east, they called themselves Daveigh Deltah. I'm still looking for a music sample, but I have some really old holotapes about their life. I figured we could listen to it, maybe get a bit of inspiration, while we wait on room service. What information I got says they were originally a vault dweller. Here's a bit of an interview with their overseer.
Had a mixed bag in the vault. Some I knew personally for years prior to their assignments, such as Helga or Bruno. Some I knew by reputation, such as Max. And others I knew nothing of until they found themselves at my doorstep. David Dorsey was one of them. High cheekbones, a quiet demeanor, a pleasant tenor voice, of all of 19 years. Suddenly assigned to me with almost nothing to go on. He told me his father had been a structural engineer, based in Virginia, and then a year ago he'd received a mysterious invitation to Vault Tech University, on a hasty track to get him ready for a vault assignment. He was quiet and humbled. No arguments when I gave him his initial assignments and training routine. He simply complied. A mysterious stranger with nothing more than his name. I remember distinctly, early October. He was cleaning my office quietly while I worked. Nothing was said, and then I heard this, barely audible, singing, coming from behind me. It caught my attention. A bit of a crooner song, but sung perfectly. I asked him what he was singing. He was initially quiet and dismissive, but I told him he sung nicely and encouraged him to sing again, but louder. I opened a floodgate that day, and he started belting out all of his emotion. Love, pain, loss, happiness, freedom came flowing through. His range went into the alto, mostly stayed in the tenor. And then, by chance, or divine providence, he started singing one of mine and Yvonne's favorite songs. We had slow danced to, many times. And then I remembered I'd never have a chance to again. I admitted I choked back the tears as I told him I thought I finally had a place figured out for him in the vault. That fateful day when I had to make the announcement, and then gave the floor to our child preacher Ezekiel, and I made a difficult request of David, who was not made of stone, and knew his last family member was finally gone. Asked him to sing a song over the intercom. Anything. Just something most of us would know, and more songs, if he could manage. The red eyes and pain was quite apparent on his face. He would later tell me that he didn't sing for them. He sung for himself, a way to channel all that sudden loss. But nevertheless, a few renditions, and much like Ezekiel's sermon, did more good than he realized. His singing career, if that's what you could call it, was a purely part-time affair for a number of years. But he became a bit of an underground sensation, and most of the vault would pester him to sing this or that when he had the time. I couldn't hold back his fans' requests, so I started him out with 2 official appearances over the intercom a week. He'd sing something of his choosing, followed by a popular request. But like all things, the other shoe dropped. I heard rumors that he engaged in deviant lifestyle choices, much like Max, or frankly, a number of others. Major Starr and some of my other department heads wanted the problem nipped in the bud. Imprisonments, maybe even executions. But some of our more eccentric personalities were also some of our most talented people. I had to comprise a few demotions, some official documentation on their records. If Vault Tech had survived, it would simply become their problem, but not until the doors opened. When it came to David, my official action was to remove him from the intercom. A fleeting action, but one that negated accusations of my unwillingness to address the issue. He promoted his first album as an underground movement. He hyped up the idea that his music was now banned in the vault. His popularity flourished. 24 songs, no less of his own devices, and the decision to take a stage name. He had never really liked being addressed as David, and often preferred to be called Daveigh, but now it came with an unusual spelling. Goodbye David Dorsey. Hello Daveigh Deltah. His music and act ranged from being up with the best smart-dressed lounge singers to rebellious displays of drag and makeup. A sated major star by insisting even Dean Domino was covered in makeup, especially during his stage shows, but he quipped that Dean Domino never wore pink satin and lace. As the years went on, most of my conservative department heads gave up on their more fanatical and puritanical suggestions, and Daveigh Deltah flourished in his eccentricity. I thought him just as queer and strange as Maxwell, but part of me celebrated his transformation into a beautiful swan that spoke to us all, wanted to make us be better and more confident people. By the time I had given Wet Willie a lounge of his own, Daveigh had released 4 more albums, one of them purely covers of classic songs, so that even the conservative major star had something he could enjoy. He was an eccentric stage act, but aside from that he was a truly kind and caring soul. Showed up to training like he was just any other vault dweller, had no problem filling in for other assignments. While he was regarded as a fruit, he was extremely popular with the ladies. I admit, he could even make me sway and swoon. He had a different gull, or fellow, almost every week. I know he had some special relationship, of affection, with Maxwell, off and on. They seemed to almost inspire each other, but over the years it seemed to just drift into a good friendship. He became really tight with Wet Willie and Helga. Not sure how physical it became, but they were thick as thieves. He was often his headlining act, with such a range that it never left his audience unhappy. I never had returned to the intercom because he had outgrown it. Sure, I had to take down his posters regularly, but it only made him avant-garde, a dose of rebellion in a pill that any vault dweller could swallow. I had long ago started to allow a bit of rebellion in hairstyles, colors, subtle touches of makeup. As long as it was tame while on duty, I ignored many vault tech directives. I had to be frank. He started out as a solo act, but after an album added a backup singer, somebody to play the guitar. But after a decade or so he started to have regular bands. The Way Outs, a psychedelic rock and roll band, strange song names, stranger lyrics, but a foot tapping, hip swaying mania that even I couldn't ignore. And lastly, the Cosmics, strange makeup, insisted they were from another world. Maybe they were. Some creative instruments, electronic music, used an old Miss Nanny voice box in one song. The last year in the vault was a thoughtful for many. Some were terrified of what they'd find. Some were inspired. Others wanted to live and die in the home they knew for the last 24 years. We had always planned a party, a celebration, for the day before Reclamation Day. Wet Willie and Daveigh wanted to take it to the next level. A party that would ring out for generations, centuries even. It was a showcase of vast talent. Billy and company did a moving take on The Tempest. Jim Rogers sung the most stirring sea shanty. We were sailors returning to land after all. Daveigh started out with songs from his last album with the Cosmics, then one with the Way Outs. Lastly, a surprise duet with Jim Rogers. Unforgettable. You would have thought they had sung together their entire lives. And his last words, stirring. He admitted to being afraid of what they would find in this brave new world, quoting Billy. But the vault had taught him who he was. Neither man nor woman. Something in between. Something new. He remarked that male pronouns no longer described him. He wasn't sure what did. I expected a bit of a peanut gallery response, but even Major Star remained silent and gave him the floor. I feel like if the next day hadn't been Reclamation Day, there would have been hell to pay. But they had given the vault so much, and this admission was a small exchange. You could have cut the silence with a knife. When Willie took over and gave his final sign-off, Daveigh approached me just after the party ended, and Sab and others had been hauled back to their quarters. He didn't say anything but very lightly kissed me on the cheek. It wasn't exactly a romantic approach. After the admission, I'm not sure who I was talking to. A man making an approach. A woman casually showing affection. A child looking for a mother. Daveigh simply said thank you. I asked what for, and they told me, for everything. Daveigh was still on my mind in the morning. I somehow got a full night's sleep, all ready to reclaim the surface. The gifts and notes left for me in my office. I can still remember the flood of emotion. I didn't see any of them for another year. I considered who I'd miss most if they perished. I still haven't figured that out, but my day was made a bit brighter when Daveigh walked through my door in Sutton. They took a stiff nip of gin from my collection, a hefty exhale, and just remarked in that quiet, unassuming voice, what a day it had been. Asked them if they had figured things out yet, a year later, after their daring admission. Daveigh paused for the longest time, and a tight and mischievous smile later. They hadn't figured it out yet. But this world was so full of promise and possibilities. There was time to explore all the options. Just before they left, they turned back to me and said there was still plenty of time. I had cocked my head in confusion, and they just told me to find what we had been missing all along.
I'm hoping my Pip-Boy recording feature actually works during trail runs. In the vault, it failed a couple of times, but here goes. I was given the name David Dorsey when I was born, in London, 45 years ago at this point. Am I really that old now? I came to the shores of America, Virginia to be more precise, when I was 9 years old. My father was an engineer, and with things getting bad in Europe he came to where the work was. I made it to the vault. He didn't, but it was in the vault where I figured out who I really was. Or at least, I started to find out who I really was. I wasn't like the other boys. Then I realized, maybe I wasn't. Was I a woman? What was I? A journey helped by Maxie, by a few sympathetic ears, a lot of eyeshadow, so many shades of lipstick, a bit of fashion advice from the unlikeliest of sources. And I was born, reborn, whatever, Daveigh Deltah. I didn't have a complete problem with my name. I hated David, but I liked it when my father would call me Daveigh when I was little. And to Dorsey, well, my father's name, and he had been gone so long. I remember Max remarking how Delta represented a rate of change in science. And that faithful day, when I went on stage at Wet Willie's and introduced myself, perhaps for the first time ever, as Daveigh Deltah, and perhaps a star was born. However, that is my past, and my future apparently starts with running away from Chinese-speaking metal spiders. Don't think they were asking me to take them to my leader. A farm down the road, a pond, put the Geiger counter in my Pip-Boy to the test, and as I suspected, the water was moderately radioactive. My first experience with new life. Squirrels covered in tumors. A two-headed possum. It couldn't be any weirder, but I was wrong. It walked on two legs, had two arms, seemed to speak, but everything else, oh God, I couldn't help but put it out of its misery. I had forgotten that Flatwoods had been so close to the vault. Just down the road really, but it's so quiet. Silence is terrifying. It looks like police and medics came together after the bombs fell. Became something new. Human kindness in the face of adversity. I never knew my mother. She died when I was 2. But my father told me she was the milk of human kindness. The very face of compassion, but that it had been her undoing. I finally found a reflective surface. Already dirty, Somehow reapplying a bit of lipstick made the world a bit more okay and less terrifying. I suspect I'm not the first to come through flat woods. I certainly wasn't the first to leave the vault. I think that honor belongs to either Max or that Boy Scout Eric. I have apparently now joined the responders. I managed to take a lengthy break and listen to the stories of those now dead for quite some time. They were cautiously optimistic. I reunited with a few of my fellow survivors. We haven't said much. I spied a Slocum Joe's. I bet if I had shown up there, before the bombs, I would have been kicked out for being a degenerate. I managed to bum a cigarette or two so I could smoke in peace as we made it up to Morgantown. The buildings are a warm familiar reminder, but the half-dead things wandering around them, not so much. I finally spied Max at the airport. I didn't approach him, but it was funny watching him draw a comically large penis on an old I-bot. A few of us decided to lure down a cargo boat. Many of these scorched creatures around. I was surprised to see Helga, the Key Queen herself, actually do something for a change. But Willie and Helga ran off into Morgantown, hoping to spot some pro-war booze. I was tempted to go with my old chums, but somehow I've been lured down to Charleston. I split off after a few miles. I kept getting stares. Maybe they thought I'd dropped my so-called act when we came out. Maybe it's just me being paranoid and self-conscious. While he's an egotistical little prick, Max is probably the closest I found to love, of a certain fashion. He was several firsts. First to bring me flowers in the morning. First to, at least, offer to cook me breakfast. Sometimes it wasn't in what he did do, but in what he didn't do. He never really remarked on my appearance, but he'd very casually make suggestions on better bases, on better applications. And he'd even slip me the occasional hair dye from colors he'd gotten bored of. Maniac decided to throw some verbal jabs my way, wondering loudly if the vaccine would straighten me out. Maybe grow me some balls, as he put it. Much to his chagrin, nobody else was laughing. I could have thrown something back at him, but I was too tired. Had been tired of the last 25 years in fact. After a shot, and a shared shot of whiskey, with old friends like Helga, and unlikely allies such as Reverend Black, and now I have no idea what to do with myself. A couple of us started heading up to Pleasant Valley Ski Resort, a playground for rich tossers back in the day. Now it's just a ghostly voice over a radio signal. A good hike and a couple of nasty fights later, I boosted the radio signal for this person, creature. Who knows? I'm really thankful for Sam, Edgar, even that bonehead Eric. All that training paid off. I had my first good laugh in weeks, months. A Miss Nanny reprogrammed as a raider boss. I sensed this was a person, or at least, a memory of one, but to care so little. A luxury we can't always afford. It's not surprising that some rich bitches decided to become raiders. Every civilization had them. At the beginning, at the end. Visigoths, Vandals, Mongols, and now, the cutthroats. Apparently the secret to making friends with a deathclaw is cherry red lipstick and whistling at it like it's your childhood dog. Rosalind. Rose. It all makes sense. Even this David thought wasn't above having feelings. A money nuke and a flooded city. Most guys would just say it with flowers and chocolates. I have to say I was almost sad to go. Rose grew on me. At least a little bit. Was tempted to ask her if she was single. Had to remember she was just a programmed tin can and could never be Rosalind. I guess David probably figured that out. We trip into the mire. A literal cradle of life. From the smallest disease parasites to the largest. What the hell is that thing? A big girl sing. Maybe we could have made sweet music together. But not like she ever listened to any of my songs. The problem with living 25 years in a metal bubble. I watched Eric tell off Helga. Normally I'd rush to my old friend's side, but frankly, she's a bitch, and she deserved it. Points for little Eric becoming a man. For a change, I found an old steel guitar out near what's left of Harper's Ferry. I strummed a bit, nothing fancy, but somehow it was enough to relax me, just a bit, for some much needed rest. I woke up to something in a fur outfit, of sorts, and a metal helmet, painted in red, painted in blood maybe. But somehow, I knew it was Edgar. He removed that helmet and his face wasn't much of an improvement. He just asked, who was I? Daveigh, I reminded him, but he asked the question again. I was torn between two answers. I don't know, and who I decide to be. One was about honesty and the other about freedom, but I'm not sure which was which. We didn't say much but shared a meal, of sorts. He had been hunting and I was starving. My belly was full for the first time since we left the vault. I turned out that old guitar I found, started strumming what I thought were random notes, until he started to hum along, as deep as throat singing. But it took me the longest time to understand what we were playing together. The last song I played at Wet Willie's, the night before Reclamation Day, not as colorful as my other songs, just about longing for what we lost, and longing for what we'll find. Never got to sing it again, until now. When we finished, he simply remarked that I had my answer, to who I really was, and just as quickly he left again. I don't think I could have followed him, even if I had wanted to. I spotted Sub and followed him up to Camp McClintock. It was good to see him. We ran a few of the courses together. Apparently we're now privates in the army, but the loyalty test somehow haunted me. Maybe because I could have been its subject. The survivors have started to gather. Many of them are looking to Annabelle or Althea for guidance, but they're almost as lost as the rest of us. We didn't exactly take a vote, but somehow Annabelle, the A-bomb, is running the show. We have to deal with the scorched problem once and for all, or we'll just be repeating history. Max had a present for me. Well, two. One was a fresh supply of eyeliner in a couple of shades. The other was a laser pistol with a few attachments. A lengthy journey, and I discovered another militia that formed. The Brotherhood of Steel. A vainglorious name if I ever heard one. My search for Paladin Liz Tag-Gerdee has reached its conclusion. Her broken body at the bottom of a radioactive cavern. All soldiers think of themselves as heroes. Potentially at least. And dying a hero's death. I go deeper into the rabbit hole as I discovered a shadow government. Of sorts. The Enclave. And all that's left is Modis. A supercomputer. Who is apparently willing to help us. At least to rid the surface of the scorch. We now have all the parts to our plan. A new color detonation above that cavern. The final Scorch Beast, apparently the Queen of the Hive, and the hope that we can all outlast it during a fight. The night before, I had a crowd of a few, very few, wanting to hear a few songs of mine, starting with my last one, some creative attempts at instruments, and we had ourselves a band. Somehow that music made it possible to get some sleep, regardless of all the fear and uncertainty about tomorrow. I somehow survived the fight, a broken rib, a wrist, but alive, had to bury 2 of last night's band members, tried to hold back the tears. But at least our dead had a moral. It'll be a few weeks before I'm healed up. Took an offer to get some safe bed rest and not have to worry about things until then. Got a surprise visit from the surviving band members. A piss-poor attempt at some music was enough to make me smile, because at least I knew now who I was.